All right. Good morning, everyone. And I'm Roseanne, and we have Patrick Lovell, the producer of the con, with us. And we have Danny with us. And we're going to have a conversation. Okay.
Danny, so nice to see you, man. Tell us who you are and where you operate, and kind of like an overview of kind of your ideology and what brought us together. Really, is just the your presence on X and your support of Cornell West and all that elicits. Kind of give us an idea of why you support Cornell and who you are in the mix.
All right. Well, I've been an activist now for quite a few years. Mostly coming from the climate front, climate activism. Um, it got to the point after doing just about every trick in the book, from petitions to demonstrations to even running for office, getting arrested, all of those things finally reached a conclusion. And the conclusion was that it's not ignorance and it's not stupidity that is stopping action from happening. It is corruption that is stopping it. Quickly went and checked with some other folks on other fronts, activist fronts, be it in social justice areas. Same problem. We all run into the same brick wall, which is the absolute refusal of the establishment to take any of the action that they have to take. In other words, that means all the protests, all the actions we've been doing are absolutely pointless because they don't lead to any action.
Let me
So,
actually follow up with that real quick, because I think this is really cool from the standpoint that, I mean, you've been around, and you're one of these people that I've grown up appreciating my whole life, that have always had skin in the game in our democracy and the way that our sort of leadership runs, and that we the people need to express ourselves to be able to try to formulate pathways to solving very complicated problems that we're all facing, but particularly none are more important than the climate situation. Can you give me an idea real quick, Danny, what that constitutes for you?
well, it's all well. The entire struggle basically is one: what kind of future does my kids get? That it culminates into that. The future is the future. I see the world, I guess, on trajectories. So once you're on a trajectory, you can see the path it's heading to, and it's not a good path. Um, I don't know. I don't see it as complicated at all. I see it more as simple. Once you define the problem, all right, it simplifies everything because it avoids all the tangents, everything else. The problem is not every one of the issues that are unsolved. It is the problem that they are not being solved because we put it into the hands of people who are not going to solve them. Those people have to be removed. So my mantra, I guess, would be remove and replace, and that's where I'm coming from. Now, what I've done is I've started to investigate into that, and I've zeroed in on democracy itself. Now I get all kinds of blowback on it. Well, it's not a democracy, it's a republic, and we've never had democracy and all this bullshit. Well, that's fine. That's all describing the water, but we're all drowning, right? The objective here is to get out of the water. And if democracy is the way to go, democracy can serve its purpose. Now, I look at democracy from a direct and participatory aspect. All right. It's not this voting for people in Congress and the rest of it. It's none of that nonsense. It's about direct participation. These people are representatives, or more aptly put, delegates that we send there, but they sure as hell don't act it. They don't conduct their role. They don't even communicate with the people. So the whole thing is broken. It's broken, and it's broken beyond repair. It has to be completely purged and rebuilt.
I
And when
love
you've
I
got
love what you're
rebuilding, you
talking
got
about. I love what you're talking about, but
when you
let me ask you a setup question here real quick there, because I'm with you. So I've spent the last 13 years basically reconfiguring my understanding of power, That's what it comes down to. And
Right.
the democracy, look, it's not like I haven't been naive. I've been around the block, maybe not as much as you have, but I've been around the block for decades, watching and observing how our, the trajectory of who we are, what we are, given the big questions. Okay, how do you sustain yourself? What is the economy? What is the energy paradigm? What is the outcome? What is the technology? What is the science? What are all of the elements and the ramifications of what it is, what we do? Now, two things happened in my life that really set the stage for what it is that you're saying. The first was 9/11, because 9/11, when you look at 9/11, anybody who understands any sort of, investigatory fingerprints of analysis of how things work and specific crimes and everything else, there was for a long time a lot of folks were completely, and still are, of the mindset that there was some sort of inside conspiracy that led to a lot of like people losing their minds, quite frankly, about who could have been the culprits, how the whole thing went down, what it was all about, who stood to benefit, and everything else. We could talk for hours and hours and hours about what we know, what we
Right.
don't know, who knows this and that. But what
But we're
I did
describing the
find,
water.
but what I do know is a very basic element of this in terms of a construct of a global structure is that the United States, our currency, our the global reserve currency of the dollar is predicated primarily since 1971 on the commodity and the interaction and the cooperation between Saudi Arabia as a swing producer and all things that finance what the dollar can do around the world. So that's first and foremost. Second of all, the outcome with the science. I mean, we knew that Exxon knew climate change was real in the 70s. We know that they've paid for lobbying groups. We've known that they paid for very active people to create misinformation for decades and decades and decades. And there's been, let's call them, activists on the far right lunatic fringe that have been paid by this monstrosity, by the Koch brothers and big time financed and dedicated people for a very long time. But it's gone on overdrive the last, let's call it, they found a very easy way to get the masses. The Tea Party has existed for a long time. That everything post 2008 with the Koch brothers and the far right movements have galvanized. I don't think these guys really gave a crap about Donald Trump. I think they were already there. I think they just got their kind of guy, where this convergence of all of these major players behind the scenes that are, yeah, right. But what I'm saying is that look, I know business, all right, and people in business who get paid to do things, they get paid to be very sophisticated at being able to lay out structures and steps for actual outcomes and achievement, right? So you mentioned about the fractured sort of marketplace of ideas and democracy and whether or not it's a republic and all this other bullshit. What we are, and what I say frequently, the way I interpret it, is that we're a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses socialism to fuel the mafiocracy that is now creating fascism. That's the structure. And so, but what that means in your world, though, what I'm trying to understand from you, because you're a smart guy that's been around for a long time, and you've seen that this doesn't work with grassroots organization, that this doesn't, you run into a wall eventually, and that you have said outright that corruption is the problem. And that's music to my ears, because you've identified exactly what the problem is, but maybe we got there two different ways.
Well,
but now that you
allow me to interject, okay? Because first off, I want to move on where we're going instead of how we got here. Okay, because we're already here. Okay, and we have converged at this moment. Okay, it's not just the corruption, all right? It's those who facilitate the corruption. Those who facilitate the corruption I define as the enemy. I clearly see this as a class war. The people that I'm engaging with, I'll be honest with you at this point, are more to the fringe of the oppressed. Okay, very much I'd say half of my connections are the Black community. Okay, a good portion of it being the Native community. Okay, because these are the people who have lived this reality for a long time. This reality is now creeping up and consuming the rest of us. Okay, so it's a common enemy, and these people already are in the game. They're more organized than we are as white people. Okay, because they've been there a long time. They've been resisting and surviving. All right, so they know part of the path. Now it's the time to build on that path and move it forward. So what I've seen is, okay, well, how do we engage democracy and all this now? Ralph Nader came up with a great approach for it. Basically, if it's about power and about consuming power. You know, on my Substack there, I've got one article. That's why I love the Substack, by the way, because you put an article on there, you can always refer back to it. It's sitting there. Okay, there's one article called Shifting My Climate Activism that I put out last December. Okay, which is basically an open letter to all my fellow climate activists that says I'm basically seemingly withdrawing from the climate activism front and I'm moving to this other one, which is the democratic front, the political front, the front of fighting the enemy that is blocking us all. And it's all concludes that it's all about power. And it's about who's got the power, what do they have to hold on to that power, what weapons do they have to hold on to it, and what are their strengths so that we can defend against them, what are their weaknesses that we can exploit, okay, and taking this on in a war footing with a war strategy. And it's all about shifting power. How are we going to go about it? Ralph Nader proposed of starting to take over Congress seat by just setting up town halls. Don't worry about election cycles. Don't worry about candidates. Don't worry about platform. Don't worry about issues. Just unite the people together in one spot. The people will make all the decisions from there, which is pure, direct, participatory democracy. I've looked
I
at
love
it.
the sounds of it.
That's
I
what
love
it
the
means.
sounds of it, and I
That's what
love
it
Ralph
means.
Nader. I love what Ralph
All
Nader
right.
stands for, and I love what you stand for. So what are we going to
Right.
create?
So
What
that's where I got into. Then a few months ago, Dr. Cornel West throws his hat in the ring. Now, this is not a Green Party. I'm talking with them, by the way. I'm working with them now. We're working out aligning, a sort of method of operating so we don't trip over each other, that kind of thing, watching consistent messaging, what have you, and not duplicating of efforts. Okay, so we're just working that out now. I've got a liaison there that I
so that
work
sounds like
with
strategic.
directly in.
That strategy.
Right, right. So we're just building up sort of our rules of engagement at this point. Okay. Dr. West comes on board. Simply, he's 70 years old. Okay. He's an idealist, 50 years plus history of working for the working class and oppressed people, for the poor class. It's been consistent all the way through. 70 years old. I'm 65. I get the vibe. He's not doing this to elevate himself in any, personal gain because there's nothing to it. Right? He just has this feeling of this need to do it. He's driven to do it because it's what he feels he must do. He's a placeholder, if you will. Okay. But what he brings to the table is what everybody's been looking for. Okay. And I mean, everybody by the people that are engaged that understand what you and I are talking about here at whatever level, maybe not as deep, but they know that the system is corrupt and it has to be changed. And that's on right wing and left wing. It runs across the whole gambit. Okay. That it's a corrupt system and it has to be removed and replaced, that people have to unite together. The problem is nobody's been shining a light on where that place is where people can all gather and unite. Where do we go? We're all sitting here in our own little bubbles, knowing that we've got to unite and nothing, there's no place to go to. Where and when do we go? Cornel West comes in. I now call it Cornell's Place. We're all going to meet up at Cornell's Place. That's where we meet. Okay. So now he's given us a place. The beauty of this election cycle, now, regardless of the outcome, is it also gives us now a time event. So now you got a place and a time for everybody to gather on and focus to the next steps of the path that we're on. And the step of this path is, like Martin Luther King says, right? Faith is taking the first step and not seeing the entire staircase. Because once you take that first step and people start getting together, you've got a lot more people now to define what that next step is. You don't have to make all the decisions. We all know what the destination is. It's remove and replace the garbage we've got. Okay.
Let me ask you a couple of
So we
questions
all-
right there. Can I ask you a couple of questions right there, Danny? You strike me as a very, very knowledgeable guy. been around the block, you've got your heart in the right place, you've got the right ideology from where I'm coming from. Okay. What I'd like to know from you, Danny, is you got to a point where you got to the vagaries again, where it's like it's got to be
So
faith.
the
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Let me finish this though, because it's very important that I understand where you're coming from, and I'd like you to understand where I'm coming from, because I think that there's extremely important synergy here if there is a blend of how this whole thing works. So you have decided, you've
on the
discussed
same
with me
page.
it, and by the way, I've been a huge fan of Dr. West forever, but I also am, I'd say, very detailed on my criticism of Dr. West because I know what he doesn't know. Now, I know that sounds extremely arrogant, but it's not arrogant because I'm trying to express to you and to Dr. West and to everybody who wants what is the faith in more of what we both know, a balanced, unified, fair equilibrium where everyone has opportunity built in this massive construct. In order to form a more perfect union based on the history that ties together the original revolution all the way through the civil rights movement and everything that's happened in between. We both know we're not perfect people, but here's the big question for you and everybody who's on that page. There are details that exist that name names and express exactly how this system works to the way that it does to create what you are against. Are you against being able to reveal the details to everybody who has to unify so they can actually see the face behind the curtain and
No,
understand what buttons they're pressing? You're not
no,
against that.
I'm not opposed to it at all. I mean, education is a component, okay, of any movement. Education is a continuous component. And no, nothing should be hidden. Nothing should be hidden at all.
Okay, but education, no, I hear
Give
you
me
on
that.
that. But I
Here's where I run into a snag. Okay, if you're going to focus on one issue, which is I put into the category of explaining how we got to the position we are at today. Okay, if we focus on doing that, which we've been doing infinitum over and over again from all fronts, from the financial front, from the political front, from the environment front, from everything, we're describing the problem. Okay, once we're at the point now where the problem is that these nefarious few people, be they on Wall Street, corporate executive suites, what have you, they are the problem. The solution is remove their power. Period. That's it. We
Okay,
don't
but
need
what
to
you're saying,
describe
but
how they
hold on,
got
hold on.
that power.
No. But you have to describe how they got that power because that's where you don't erect a building to stand without knowing the actual absolute
And
specificity that enables the
and that's a,
foundation and the building to
that
be able to withstand natural conditions.
that is a
So,
and and I would spend hours and all that with you going through that. But I'm looking at it from the viewpoint of
doesn't take hours.
average Joe and Jane citizen.
So can't,
I'm
but
looking at
okay,
it from their the way they think is a lot more simpler mind. Let me give you an example just on the recent tweet that we had. I put out for the bankers got billions. I know it's trillions. You know it's trillions. If I put in there that it's trillions, people are looking at me and they're saying, well, that's a bit of an exaggeration there. You're making it look worse, so it's not truthful. And I'm not, that wasn't the message of the tweet. The message of the tweet is here's where that money is going. To an average Joe, a trillion and a billion are both unknowns. They're just massive amounts. Changing a T to a B doesn't make any difference in the messaging. I use the X or the Twitter. Okay. I use that to test messaging. I use it to test where people are coming from. I use it to engage with people, to get into discussions on things that I'm pondering, to see where their perspective is coming from. I already know the answer of the discussions that I'm having. I want other people to tell me where they're coming from to get to those answers because I want to understand where they're coming from so that I can channel the messaging that we need to get them engaged. Okay?
I
This
dig
is
it. I dig
about
it. But I dig it. But here's let me just ask you a couple of sequence of questions. So you said at the outset of this, you're dealing primarily with people of color because they've been around the block, they've done this, they know exactly what they're dealing with, and they've
they've
survived
already
for a long time.
started.
So what does
They're
Dr.
further.
Cornell what does Dr. Cornell West and the African American community from where you're sitting understand about the specificity of the great 2008 financial crisis? What does it mean to them? Do you know?
Well, I wouldn't say specifically that I know, but I know that the awareness and all that is there because who's the first person aligned with Cornell West to help him out? Chris Hedges. And Chris Hedges is quite knowledgeable on all these things. What causes the wars? He's been on the front lines.
Except for the details of what I'm trying to get you both to understand, because I've got the same respect for Chris Hedges, but even he, as genius as he is, does not have the understanding of the systemic details of what they both could utilize to really slam dunk the case. Now, let me bring it back to the people on the streets, though. So let me proffer this, okay? So you and I both know that ever since we had African Americans in this country, it's been under indentured servitude, slavery, and that sort of thing until we had the Civil War, the 13th Amendment, and then we end up with Jim Crow and everything that constitutes, and then the Civil Rights Movement and everything else. From the span of the Civil Rights Movement forward with the Great Society, and then ultimately what we got in housing, which is really the ticket to the middle class in the United States, we had a transition from redlining, which was preventing African American homes to be able to get into the American dream. Now, there's a thing called subprime lending that's different than many other things that came through that I'm an expert in. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but I am. But the long and the short of it is what I'm trying to convey to you, and then ultimately through you to the actual people that are interested in Dr. West, but primarily Chris Hedges and Dr. West, is this. So just a couple of very simple things. African Americans didn't matter what their level of education was. Okay. It could have been, an elderly African American woman who inherited a house from a husband who passed away and she lived on a fixed income. That could be one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum could be doctors or attorneys or professionals within the Beltway that just happen to be African American who happen to have PhDs. Do you know what the difference between those two specters were in terms of lending between, let's call it, late 90s and early 2007? But I still think it's going on now, probably more so now. But do you know what the difference in terms of the lending practices were for those, obviously different sets of criteria? Do you know what the differences were from the standpoint of the actual lending apparatus?
No, but I don't need to know at this point.
But you
Okay,
do,
this is my
because they were
point.
hold on a second. They were targeted. Okay, doesn't matter who they were. All they needed was to have black skin. They were targeted. Do you know that, by the way?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I know what redlining and all that is. I know how the liar
No,
lap
but
loans work. I got one myself.
who was they? It's the actual banks themselves. Of Wells
Yes.
Fargo Bank, for example, having a vertical to where they targeted, didn't matter where they were in the income bracket. They were forced into what we call predatory loans by financial institutions, and they were tricked by using documentation fabrication into loans that were going to explode. They were set up. Okay. Let me give you the final word on this real quick, and then we can move forward. 55% of African American household wealth that had been generated and created since we got rid of redlining, all the way through, what we call, in fact, the African Americans were blamed based on, this apparatus of these evil, denizens of Wall Street. It was through the commodity, gosh darn it, why can't CFR, where they forced banks to lend in their 50-mile apparatus. I can't think of the term. It'll come back to me in a minute. But we created laws to basically break down redlining, to create lending, which was part of the apparatus. But what the banks did was they created these liar's loans to set up African Americans, where they ripped 55% of American household wealth from the African American community. And the devastation was like literally a firestorm of terrorism in African-American neighborhoods throughout the United States, particularly in some of the wealthiest African-American neighborhoods in the United States. Prince George's County had 75% foreclosure rates between 2012 and 2018. So what we're talking about is a mass targeted financial scheme with details that stole trillions of dollars of upside from the African American community. Does that help?
Right. Yes, but it's housing, all right? It's environmental theft. It's direct land theft.
Absolutely.
Okay? It's on every facet. Geez, they steal, basically they steal art even. Okay. So everything that we're a nickel and can be squeezed out. The system that we are fighting here will
CRA,
take
Community Reinvestment Act. Okay, that's fine. But see, here's to your point. Okay, here's to your point that Dr. West and quite frankly, Mr. Hedges above all else need to really wrap their head around, because Chris Hedges has already been in this space. Okay, so when we talk billions, okay, and then you're like, okay, these people don't know the difference between billions and trillions. Hold on a second. Let me just finish this. Let me just finish this point. Let me just finish this point. So ultimately, when you say, yeah, okay, billions got to the banks, no, the specific number in 2009 was 29 trillion. Now, where did that come from? It came from the Levy study. It came from Bernie Sanders doing some investigation. And then ultimately it wound up, because of FOIA requests and all sorts of incredible stuff, that wound up with the Levy Institute that got these numbers, which are the accurate numbers. It's actually closer to 30 trillion. That was all done illegally. How many Black people have been talking about reparations from slavery for a long time, right? In 2009, 30 trillion, okay? Trillion went to the banks that targeted, and they weren't the only ones, but it started with African Americans, targeted African Americans to destroy their lives. And this isn't hyperbole. We have the evidence and the facts of everything. Hold on, let me just finish this though, because you've got to understand this. I'm sorry to make it difficult with details, but it's not difficult. The bottom line is, and you're way smarter than these details, okay? This is just the beginning, but it's the very surface level of it all. Everybody understands theft, okay? Everybody understands if you, what?
Who is doing this?
Who did I just tell you? The financial system.
Right.
The financial system. Yes, okay. Right. Okay.
Yes,
but
they're out there stealing oil. They're out there stealing uranium. They're out there stealing gold from other countries.
Right.
They're stealing everything.
So are you aware, because you live in your house, whether you rent or whether you own, doesn't matter, because there's certain rules and you have basically a structure that creates the purpose of either rental or home, under which there's parameters of which certain things are supposed to happen, right? With home ownership and lending, you would acknowledge that the underwriter and the lender have to follow specific concrete rules to be able to provide specific lending under specific scenarios. Would you agree to that? Are you aware of that?
I agree to that, but I'd like to get to the point now of what.
No. I'm going to let you get to the point, but I got to finish this point before we go any further, because the bottom line is, when you lie and when you deceive, that we have specifically civil rights laws that if you break those civil rights laws, then you're guilty of either a civil settlement or felonies in specific situations around the country, and that gets really, really detailed. Hold on, let me finish this though. But you have specific ingredients by which there are methodologies of making loans under certain circumstances that have to be transparent, that have to have that don't go against the grain of the civil rights through unfair, deceptive acts and practices, which is a felony. And then you have to be able to have the appropriate freaking work all saddled together to be able to move through the system for that loan to be real, first and foremost. Okay. Second of all, if, for example, if you go bankrupt in any particular situation, or you lose your money and everything else, there's certain rules and codes and scenarios that make that process the way it's supposed to go. Now, do you, under any circumstances, have you ever come across a scenario that if you broke the law to get a liar's loan, that you cheated the bank, for example, and that you went bankrupt, would then the bank just provide you limitless amounts of money because you lied to them? Would they give you that amount of money? I mean, limited amount of money
No,
for you lying to them, would they?
yeah, they probably foreclose on you.
Okay, so what happened was the banks themselves did exactly what I just said, except they did it to the American people. And then the Federal Reserve, that has laws and regulations based on the code of how you are supposed to provide loaning primarily to solvent institutions, not insolvent, not bankrupt, solvent. But if something goes insolvent because they went bankrupt because of their own fraudulent behavior, would then you loan to that apparatus unlimited amounts of money? Would you?
Yeah,
No, of course
I
not. But
wouldn't
that's
either.
exactly, but that's exactly what the Federal Reserve did, to the tune of $30 trillion to set up African Americans illegally. That we have all of those answers from all of the apparatus in the system. That's first and foremost. That ultimately, just like, North American Indian genocide and stealing land and raping
Right.
and pillaging and
Okay.
all the rest of it, of the African American community. So here you are trying to fight corruption, but by not letting people know what exactly happened to them. Why?
Okay. All right. I see where you're coming from. Okay. And there is an education element involved in that. Okay. The thing is, we're already talking to the choir here. The choir already, what has to be done? Those who partake in this corruption, the criminals, need to be removed.
How?
We are already at that point.
How?
We don't need to get to that point again right now.
How?
Education is good because it right. And that's what we should be talking about.
Let me ask you a
How do
question.
you,
Are there millions of people right now in the United States eager for Donald Trump to go down because A, he lied on documentation fraud to create an
of
insurrection,
course there are.
that now the government
Of course
is
there are.
now finding him or charging him with
Whatever the
insurrection
propaganda
and to
machine is
frauding.
pointed at
So
anybody,
the law in that particular case, millions of people are behind, correct? So why wouldn't they be for the actual financial system? Especially if you're Dr. Cornel West, who has the capacity
right?
because
But
he's
the
got the
problem is
greatest.
that there is no way of communicating to those millions of people to get that story out.
What?
Not
We have
unless
a
you
we
have
have a
to,
television series.
you have to,
We have a
you have
television
to
series
remove
called The
them.
Con that shows every single bit of it.
You
That's for
have
free.
to, but they're not going to view it. They're watching
Why? Why?
MSNBC and Fox News.
Okay, but it's up to you and Cornel
They
West
do.
and everybody else. Do you want to get the truth? Do you want to change the system? You got to do it with the facts.
There's your chance to get it. There's your chance to get it.
We spent $4.5 million to get the $29 trillion truth, to let you know how that whole thing works. And the market wouldn't let us get it to the public because the market is owned by the people that are involved with what we're talking about. Okay. So if you want to end corruption, you cannot do it without the facts and the evidence, which we have.
Fine. And I've got no doubt about that. And that's great if it was a court of law, but you understand also that the whole legal system is corrupt.
Yes, that's why we got to take it to
Right.
the grand jury of the American
Right.
people.
Which means the entire system is corrupt. All three pillars.
So why
are
wouldn't
corrupt.
why wouldn't you take the con to the millions of people that need to see it and say, here's the answers right here, man?
Because the millions of people aren't there engaged to view it yet.
Why?
You have to first get the people engaged. You have to get them there.
Did they not already lose their houses? Did they already not have their lives destroyed? Did they not already have their jobs taken? Did they not have their property taken? Did they not already know? Let me tell you something. If 55% of African-American household wealth evaporated in 2009, do you not think a vast majority of African-Americans knew somebody or they themselves experienced this? Do they not? They don't understand. They got set up. They don't understand how it works.
Understanding we're not taking anything down by just focusing on education, people. This is not an education mission. Education is a component.
Do you want to have a bloody revolution? Is that what you want?
That's called Plan B.
Okay, so would you rather have a peaceful? Would you rather have a peaceful?
I have had that discussion with people. I am engaging them. I'm having some of these people stand back and we're shooting for plan A, but we're keeping plan B in the pocket.
Does Cornel West want to have a civil rights peaceful revolution to purge corruption? I think he does.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so then how can you do it without the details? You can't. You can't. It's impossible. And I don't care if people aren't ready to hear it. We've got to force them to understand what's going on, because that's the only way we can get the truth through. Because why? Let me give you 2 examples real quick. What happened with Fox just recently with Dominion? What did they do?
I'm not hearing any strategy that makes anything a reality.
But hold on a second. What did Fox just reveal based on their them paying $600 or $787 million to Dominion? What did they just admit?
They admit that they lied.
That's their entire
About
platform
the
is a
integrity of
lie.
machines.
Their
Which
entire
I don't know whether that's true or not, because the players
Fox,
in there are all corrupt.
Fox acknowledged, and because their business model makes more money from lying than it does from the process. And so they're not the only ones, right? In fact, the entirety of media is, because the entirety of media.
I don't watch corporate news. I don't get any news from corporate
news. But here's the thing: Cornel West, Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Jimmy Dore, you name it. They don't know the details of what actually happened. And so the fact of the matter is, they've got to learn the details.
Do you want those details out there? Do you want them?
I've already got them out there. We need tens of millions of people to understand what happened.
Do you want people to view them? You want people to view them?
I want them not only to view them, but I want them to share it like their life depends on it, especially if they're in the African American community, because my God, this is the evidence. This is the evidence. This is the evidence of having the chief of police have like a mission to everybody that's in the police department to go shoot unarmed black men.
You've got the table set, but nobody's coming to the table.
Well, first of all, what do you think is nobody?
Well, nobody. I mean, anybody.
But first of all, just to give you an example, we've already been seen. We've already been seen by about 4 million people. So that's the first thing that you need to understand. The second thing is that tens of millions of people aren't getting the message, because that's how loud the lies are. The lies are insane, Danny. You know it. I know it. Why are you against being able to give people the details?
Why did I use billions instead of trillions on that tweet?
Because you're playing a game. That's why. Because you didn't think it was okay to tell the truth. Maybe you don't believe it. No, maybe you yourself don't.
Because the medium I was working with limited the amount of information I can put in it. Tweets do not give you the room to explain things. And the message that I was tweeting was not related to the amount of the corruption. It was related to the fact that there is corruption. Okay.
We're on the same. Look, we're on the same team. We want the same goal. How we get there are 2 different things. You said a couple of things here that we have to. Go ahead.
I'll propose something. You tell me whether it fits or not. Okay. The objective here. Let's say that we are on day 1. On day 1, you organize something that basically sheds a light on a place where people can come to. Okay, we have that now. Mission number 2 is you start getting 10 people to the light, 50 people to the light. As those people come in, your light's shining brighter. More and more people can now see the light. As more and more now people are seeing the light, more and more people come and join you at the light.
Agreed.
As they come in, the light gets brighter. And then 50 becomes 500 and 5,000 and 50,000 and 5 million, etc. That is how you build. The time frame I'm working with, I have about 450 days till election day. And election day is right now, the way it's set up, meaningless. Okay, doesn't matter, because the people all are set on November 5th, 2024. They all have it in their mind. I am communicating with them from where they're coming from, not from where I'm coming from. I'm meeting them at their place, not the other way around. November 5th, 2024. So we have 450 days. We've now got a place to congregate people on. My objective right now is get the first 50. From there, I can get the next 500. But it's one step at a time, and it's learning every step of the way. And part of that learning is focusing on the objective. The objective of this step is get 50 people. That 50 will then be there to also add energy to engage the next 500. They will be making more noise. They will be amplifying things. They will be organizing things. They will be contributing. And on that level, different people are going to also offer you different things. Every one of them counts, and you've got to accept them all. Some of them are going to offer you financial support. Some of them are going to offer you skills and talent. They're going to contribute that. Some people are going to want to amplify the message. Some people are just going to passively sit back and just give you their support. And you have to be able to embrace and give the welcome mat to everybody along the way. One of the bones I had to pick with the West campaign already is because I tried out their website. I clicked volunteer on it twice, 2 weeks, no response to me whatsoever on anything. You cannot operate this way. As people come in, you've got to welcome them. You've got to hug them. There's a flaw right there that has to be fixed immediately. Okay? These are the things I'm talking about. 50, 500, 5,000, 5 million. That's how this has got to work.
Danny, I'm totally
regardless, at the end of the day, and regardless of whether, and Cornell West has already put a light on this. Okay? 450 days from now, November 5th, 2024 happens. The day ends. Okay? This is what happened with the Bernie Sanders issue. Then Bernie left. He went and hugged the enemy, for Christ's sakes. Okay? All right? This is a movement. It's got nothing to do with the election day. Election day is just merely a milestone that we're building something for that happens to fit in the mindset of the population we're looking to attract. We have got to attract these people and bring them in. As they come in, we start defining exactly the enemy. We just start getting clarity to everything. That's where education plays its role. This is a matter of timing of everything.
So let me chime in there. Let me chime in there. Look, I've been around the block, as we've discussed. I've seen this type of stuff before. I respect everything you're talking about. I have the same outlook. Here's the difference. Here's the difference. Okay. Here's the difference. We've already spent 13 years. We've already spent 13 years hiding the details of what has affected everybody. So you're an environmentalist first and foremost. How do you fix the environment, my friend? Or the issues with emissions and verticals and paradigm and money and all the rest of it. Without going into too much detail, it's pretty freaking simple. You said it at the outset. How do you break the grip of those that are poisoning us and warming the planet so that we don't actually have a sustainable ecosystem? How do you end that tyranny?
Emissions have to drop.
No, you have to show.
I've got very little hope in the right outcome.
Do we have an illusion with Donald Trump's situation right now that there's some vestige of the law left? Do we have an illusion there based on the way, at least for the populace? Don't you think that's the whole point? Hey, look, DOJ is going after Donald Trump for all of this stuff that he's done. So the law must be working. So therefore we can save democracy.
The media system is broken.
It's all a facade. It's all a facade.
Universities are broken. Everything is broken.
That's right. That's right. And where's the money come from? Everything is about money. Is it not? Is everything about money?
That's right.
Okay. Where does the money come from?
Here, the problem is with those elites that are running things is they are narcissistic psychopaths. Okay.
Absolutely.
I have investigated that narcissistic psychopath will continue. It's like a cancer. It will continue to feed.
That's right.
Even though it doesn't need any more food. It will continue to feed until there's nothing left and it's consumed. You cannot stop it. You cannot change it.
You're making the same points that I make every day. You make the same points I make every day. But here's the only difference.
By the way, these guys, once they've consumed everything from us, they will start consuming each other. There is no stopping.
Like AI is the next version of this whole thing. Listen, where does the money come from? The Federal Reserve, okay? The Federal Reserve, first and foremost. So I want to finish with this real quick because we could talk about this all day. But you made all my points for me. But at the same time, I'm trying to convince you to understand the details matter. So what happened in the ramp up to the 2008 great financial crisis was that there were a group of people that were assigned through different versions of what ultimately became the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. There's always been a lot of hoopla surrounding Elizabeth Warren and her being involved with this. She wasn't. She was actually like third generation to this whole thing. Ultimately, there was a lot of people investigating what I've been telling you throughout this dialogue that discovered exactly how African Americans were being targeted under certain specific criteria. Let me finish this real quick. They got the information through the process, through what they call the FOMC committee, through a gentleman by the name of Ned Gramlich, who was the head of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, who went to none other than Alan Greenspan, who was the chair of the Federal Reserve, and laid out the details of how this predation was working. Why is that important? Danny? Do you know?
No.
Okay, because the Federal Reserve is mandated by Congress, among other things, to regulate what's known as the Homeowner Equity Protection Act, which is if you find fraudulent activity, which is not a new thing, by the way. There's an apparatus called straw buying that's been around for literally centuries, okay? Where you can change documentation and who owns what, and you can steal if somebody doesn't stop. Hold on, let me just finish this. So Alan Greenspan had all of the information because he was mandated by Congress to regulate the market. So what does that mean, Danny? What does it mean? He was supposed to shut it down. Did he do that? No, what he did was he revolved 2 years out. Hold on a second. Let me finish this. He revolved 2 years later into a massive hedge fund. And then when the world blew up in 2008, he said nobody saw it coming. Here's where the buck stopped. Okay. Where does money come from? When the entire grift blew up, 50 million Americans and tens of millions more around the world that not only got African Americans and home ownership, it got white working class and pensions and so much more. How many trillions did we use to bail them out? 30 trillion. How many billion are in a trillion? 1,000 billion, Danny. My point is, this is the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history. That is everything you're talking about. That leads to what we have to do is we have
to throw into the mix the theft of resources from other countries. Here's just in this past week, okay? Here's something that we should be paying attention to. The whole Niger thing.
Oh, okay? Yeah, that too. Interesting.
This is finally a backlash on colonialism and imperialism. Okay. How it plays out, we don't know, but I'll tell you, France and the US is not going to just sit there and let it happen. No way they're going to do that. Too much at stake. Okay. But the people there have risen up. Do they understand all the intricacies involved here? Probably not. But they know that this nefariousness has got to stop. It's got to be expunged from their lives. That's what we've got. And again, I'm going to go back to it. The people do not need all the details to the grains, to the granular level that you're saying. They already know the corruption exists. They are already outraged. More and more people are outraged.
Now, does a plane fly? Does a plane fly if you don't know how to make it fly? Does a plane fly if you don't know how to make it fly? We depend on professionals, Danny. What the people need to have is what I'm giving you is the bare essence, the bare bones.
Citizen.
The average citizen has to pull his head out of his ass and understand what reality is. Quit using freaking what are they called? I can't even think of the term when hyperbole is one thing that Bernie and Elizabeth always do. But this goes back to Cornell, the guy who's a master of language, who is a genius. Same with Chris Hedges, who do not understand the details of what they talk about. And if they did, they'd be 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more effective. So let me just finish this and I'll give you the floor to finish. Let me finish this. Let me,
They're learning quick.
they are so they're way beyond my intelligence.
You're
For
not
anybody who thinks I'm a
You're not
for
politicians.
anybody who thinks that I'm a know-it-all that knows more than Cornel West and or smarter than Cornel West and Chris Hedges, I'm not that guy. They're way beyond my capacity. I just happen to do the work that enables me to understand the specificity that connects everything. So what we're trying to do is create a tidal wave convergence to purge populist movement, to purge corruption and the fascism it fuels. If you, me, and everybody you see who isn't a Nazi, who champions dignity, decency, integrity, sustainability, beauty among all else, if we create unity, if we create unity, the weapon is the fucking truth, Danny. It's the truth of how the system operates. And if we come together in unity, we will purge the misery of tyranny. Okay, now listen to me, Danny. You're in the right spot. You're talking to the right people. You're a vector, but you cannot give people platitudes. That's what Bernie does. That's what Elizabeth does. That's how they get ganked.
I'm not here to emulate Bernie. I'm not here for emulate Elizabeth Warren. I want them all out. Okay? I am not here for any of it. Cornel West is blending people together under humanity, right? Humanity is what binds people. It's what brings them together. It's a much more appealing than the lesser evil argument of all the other political debates. Okay? Now, I've got a proposition for you. All right? Let's say I have a city by city tour going on. All right? And I've got it arranged at universities, for example. Okay? All right? Where we go into a lecture hall, all right, and we have 2 to 3 hours. And I gave you 20 to 30 minutes speaking time, along with 5 or 6 other speakers, all sharing the stage to convey their individual messages. Would that be something of interest?
Absolutely. But this is what's so interesting about what you just mentioned. First of all, my door is open to all of that, but the door is in reverse as well. Because what we're trying to create, now I'm an 80s guy, okay? I'm a little bit younger than you. I come from the generation, if you remember Bob Geldof and Live Aid, okay? U2 and all of the music that tried to save Africa at that point. What they did with famine in Africa, if you remember that. What I'm a guy, because I'm a producer, and what I do is multimedia, and I know how to convey stories, which I've already done at the con, the www.thecon.tv, for example, and so much more.
You're an excellent speaker. You've got an excellent presence on camera and everything. By the way,
thank you.
Excellent.
And I really admire you. Just so you
know,
your
words are clear. Your words are clear.
Thank you.
You've got a very good presence. That's a skill.
Thank you. Let me just say this. I want to walk in alignment with you, and I want to have us create this tidal wave crusade, right? Because that's what it has to be. But we are also trying to create and I use this term, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but a Lollapalooza-like barnstorming revival tour, if you will, that we get this information in all of the cities across the United States because the mainstream has hidden everything, right? It's just a lying, deceptive racket that's creating this identity political war to give you the facade that the system actually is working for the people, when of course it's not. Because we just showed you that the power behind the power operated based. It's so simple once you see the ingredients. So what I would say to you is I want you and Cornel and everybody like Chris Hedges to find their way to joining us, because the fact of the matter is we can present. I've got hundreds and hundreds of hours, for example, and you need to know this in terms of Donald Trump. Donald Trump right now, among many of the indictments and many of the investigations, one of which is in the electoral certification documentation fraud because of the electoral certifications for the Electoral College in Michigan. There were 17 indictments, charges that are all felonies that are part of this conspiracy of racketeering, which of course we found the only racketeering conviction in the whole country. That is what Wall Street did. But ultimately, my team, we have access to millions of pieces of documentation fraud that were used in setting up millions of people around the country, especially Black Americans, and then used in the court of law that were documentation fabrication to steal people's houses with the courts being in on it. Okay. So suddenly you've got Donald Trump is being convicted of something that is a crime.
The documents would be worth, they will be worth a lot once you've got a judicial system that is functioning.
We need tens of millions of people to know the truth. And that's what I'm doing with everything I can. And I know you're doing it too, but I'm not speaking in platitudes. We've got the evidence. We've got the story. We've made it for free so that millions of people can watch it. And by the way, guess what our story starts with in the con? Do you know what it starts with in the con?
I can't remember. I watched the whole 10-hour.
Did you really? Okay, so let me just tell you who it starts with. A woman by the name of Addie Polk. Addie Polk was a 91-year-old African-American woman who was.
All right, but
can I finish the story real quick?
Patrick, my focus is on where I'm going from here. I already know that we've got to take this.
I hear you. Just give me 1 minute. Give me 2 minutes more. Okay. I want you to hear this out. All right. Addie Polk was this African-American widow who was basically served eviction on a day where she pulled out her husband's gun, aimed it at her chest, and shot herself because she would not go into the streets. As opposed to because here's the story. She owned her home for 4 decades. It was stolen through her through documentation fraud. She tried to tell the powers that be, the cops, the sheriffs who were working for this corrupt system unknowingly, didn't understand that she got set up in this whole thing. They came to steal her house from her, not even knowing that they're working for a criminal syndicate, which were the banks and the government that were involved with this. That's so much more. But this is what they ended up finding. Hold on a second. Last thing. Because of Addie Polk's tragic death, she opened up the door to the only racketeering influenced corrupt organization conviction in the entire country that represented exactly what Wall Street got away with. She was an African-American woman. Why wouldn't Cornel West want to understand that story? Can you tell me that?
I agree with you. Absolutely. And he would.
Okay, but then he hasn't, because I've spoken with him directly.
He is learning how to navigate the waters of the political game that he is now in because he does not come from that.
It's not a game. It's a war, buddy. That's what you know first and foremost.
Oh, it is. It is. But the war, this 450-day objective that we're at right now, this milestone, that is a game. It's the game of electoral politics.
Look, we're both men. We're adults. We understand what you got to do.
And in the judicial system, what parallels with the example of that you've given me here on the financial end, okay, look at somebody who's not poorly off. Look at Steve Donziger, right? What did he do? Nailed Chevron for billions of dollars of fines. Beat him in a court of law. And who goes to jail?
That's right.
Donziger goes.
And everything that we have in the con and then some. This is why, my friend, Cornel West is doing a disservice to his people unless he brings this to the people. Here's the thing, my friend. You didn't talk about trillions because you were like, they could go over their head. Listen, do you think Cornel West, with the evidence and the facts of $70 trillion to the system since 2013, doesn't have the goods to be able to generate tens of millions of people if he spoke truth to power? That's what he's supposed to be doing. Speak truth to power. How come he's not?
Hold on. I'll tell you why. I'm going to tell you why. Because he's speaking to the people at the level that the people can hear. That's why. He is going to the level that the people can hear. That's why he's resonating. And that's why he's scaring the 1%. Because he's
Nobody
not playing
this
tit-for-tat game.
I hear you.
Not playing for this tit-for-tat game. He's not doing it. And I agree with him on that.
The con shows Addie Polk shooting herself in the chest to get out of going homeless when she owned her fucking house, man. The devil is in the details. And the bottom line is, by hiding that from the American people, it's disingenuous. I talked to Cornel directly, just so you know. I talked to Cornel directly.
You have a tour, all right? All right? With events that are 3 hours long. 6 speakers, each one gets 20 minutes. You get 20 minutes. 5 others will be speaking on other subjects. All in terms of education and bringing all this stuff out. in one package. The package basically is the system is corrupt, it's got to go. Okay, because that's what people attend, because that is the music that they want
I'll
to
be
hear.
there. You tell me where and when, and I'll be there. But the invitation
You
is
have to
open in
concise,
reverse.
but
I
then you
went,
gotta
I
think,
went, I want
you have to
Cornell
think,
West to come to our demonstration to where we lay out the whole thing and have them go, oh,
you have to
that's
think,
what's going
how do
on.
you package everything? How do you package everything that you want to say into
Yeah.
20 minutes? Yes, you can then lead them to
That's
other
why that no,
sources.
I'll tell them. I'll trust me.
You
I
have
can do
their
that all
attention
day,
for
every
20
day. I can do
minutes.
that all day. But I've already got hundreds of
No,
hours
you
of
can't.
information
No,
out there,
you can't.
and I've also
Everything you
got
do is so
tens of
wrong.
millions of. Thank you, and we're on the same page. We're teammates. What I'm trying to tell you though is, I want you guys to win. But the only way we're going to win as a nation is if millions upon millions of us come to the table equipped with the truth, because this, in my estimation, is exodus from corruption that creates the redemption of the American dream, right? That's all well, the American dream was bullshit to begin with, but come on.
My role
Resurrection.
with the West campaign, okay, they've got people ballot access stuff, I got nothing to do with that. Okay, is to unify people, is bring people together, build coalitions.
Build it with the
Okay.
truth.
Oh, I don't have it in me to do it any other way. Okay, now there's independent media. You mentioned up about the media. There's two good news points about that. One is we know damn well that once people see it as propaganda, they'll never get those people back. And they're hemorrhaging their audiences. They're not building new audiences. So all they're trying to do is slow down the exodus. That's all they're doing. All right. So propaganda, all the machines that the 1% has is now fraying at the seams. It's collapsing. Okay, take a look. These stupid, ridiculous stories about Chinese spy balloons attacking. Okay, they're this alien business now. Okay, all the stories that they're propagating right now are not working. They're not sinking in.
Look,
Okay,
the same thing happened in 2008. Okay, but look,
and more people are rising up against them. More and more people are rising up against
but
them,
nobody
exposing them for what they are,
if
and
people
more
don't,
people are seeing it. That's
if
the energy
people
you
don't,
get.
if you can't be vague about a murder. You have to know who did what, when, and how what they did, and what their intent was, what their motive was, what their opportunity was to be able to convict them. Otherwise, yeah, go pull out a gun and shoot them, and hopefully you get away with it, right? If it's for justice. What I'm talking about,
the mafia managed to figure out ways of doing it that keeps things confused and kerfuffled, and that's the
by the way, do you think everybody in the system is a liar? Just out of curiosity, is everybody who works
inside the system?
Yeah.
I look at everybody as either being a liar or complicit with the lies by their silence.
So what we showed you in what we show you in the con is literally thousands of people came to the fore to try to tell the story before it blew up. And guess what didn't happen? The mainstream media wouldn't allow it. The mainstream media wouldn't allow this to happen. And they buried it. Okay. And then they buried it in the aftermath. Why? Because they got the message.
Propaganda is a weapon used against us.
There's a lot of great people.
That it's a weapon.
Yes.
There's
a lot of great people in the system, just so you know. They're not all freaking working for the machine.
Oh, I agree.
But the ones who are working for the machine are the ones
who are
in power.
wielding the power.
Yeah, right. And we got to break their iron grip of corruption. It's like the same story that's ever happened throughout history. Huh?
I'm not saying the cameramen and CNN are all nefarious crooks. They draw a paycheck. They don't have any content input.
This is what I got from this conversation, Danny. I knew you were a smart guy. I'm so proud to talk to you face to face. I love your energy. I love your attitude. I love what you're doing. But you also gave to me what my intuition was. That, and I don't mean to insult you with this, so please don't take it this way. But when you placate people where they are, I'm sorry, that's like trying to. I guess everybody has a different tactic, and I get it. But for me, it's like when you go to somebody who is like, let's just say he had a problem with alcoholism forever, right? And they're trying to work their way out of it after they've hit rock bottom. And you're like, I mean, you're trying to get them help. By that time, they all the damage that happened in between, it could have been stopped had they been able to realize the path they were going down before things went awry, right? I mean, how many times has that happened in natural life? It's our friends, family, things we've seen and everything else. And we want to do everything in our power to help them, but sometimes we can't, right? But sometimes when you have people that do interventions, they tell them the truth. That's what this is. It's an intervention.
Right.
It's like people,
Except
you got to
you're
understand
jumping
how
ahead.
this works. I'm
You're
not jumping
jumping
ahead.
several months ahead of me right now. Okay. My initial problem is here. I'm not placating the people that I have to work with right now. The 50, the 500, the 5,000. This initial group is already there. They're just sitting in their own bubbles because everybody's running around with no place to go. We're
Right.
giving them a place to go, put them together.
That's
then
what we're
you
doing.
work with the next, then you work with the next group of people.
Yeah.
Okay. This group just needs the home. So we got to build the home. From there, then you go to the next group. Okay.
Look,
First,
I'm
you
not
got to
running.
build. You got to take the power you've already got sitting there and put it together so that it ignites.
And we did, and we have, and I'm not running for president. Neither did Martin Luther King. I'm not Martin Luther King. I'm just a fucking dude, right? I'm a muckraking journalist who's got the goddamn truth. And also, I played football my whole life. I know how to compete, right? I know systems. The bottom line is,
I don't think Cornel West expected me running for president 6 months ago either.
okay, but listen to what I'm trying to say. The civil rights movement didn't run for the presidency. They made the president react. That's how we ended up with Great Society. And there was a lot of great changes that happened at that time. Was it enough? Absolutely not. But is it ever enough? No, because it's in order to form a perfect union and people are corrupt. But here's what we're looking at. We're looking at the end of life's ability to sustain itself on the planet. We've got oligarchs all over the country that have ripped everything away from this country. And what we've got to appeal to the American people writ large is that it's up to but it's up to the citizenry of the United States to use their minds to understand what the system is supposed to be versus the way the system is. And when they have the details of who stole it from them and how they stole it from them, if tens of millions of us are equipped with the truth, we will destroy the corruption you want to destroy.
And everything that you just said in those words becomes a lot more louder, a lot more compelling, and a lot more effective when you got 50,000 people amplifying you.
Amen,
Those 50,000 people are out there. Those 50,000 people are out there. Those 50,000 people are out there. We got to get them all into the same place.
But a vector to
That's
those 50,000,
right?
a vector to those 50,000 people plus and tens of millions of plus, quite frankly, is Cornel West. Cornel West has to know the truth. And by the way, if Cornel, you watch
today's job is get those people together. He'll listen.
Dr. West, if you watch this, yes, I am the guy who talked to you when you were at Yale before you had to leave because of all of the other stuff that was going on. I was the guy, and you basically were like, yeah, brother, I dig it. I love it. And I love where you're coming from, but you never, ever watched and engaged Addie Cole.
Cornel West twice endorsed that useless Bernie Sanders fellow. Twice.
Bernie Sanders said Wall Street's business model was fraud. Then he got $180 million in donations, and he never followed through with telling us what the fraud was. That's why he became so successful, because it was Occupy Wall Street to Bernie, but Bernie failed everybody, even though Bernie was in the mix on the deep dive on everything I'm telling you.
Bernie did one good thing. He put all those people together.
True.
Those people
I love Bernie. I love Bernie, but he never followed through.
At different degrees, but they are awake. They want massive change.
They need the truth to do it. We all do.
And that's a lot more than 50,000. Let's get the first 50,000 together. The next 5 million will be pretty easy too. Then we really got to work. But Danny, we got 500,000.
Thank you for the dialogue. I got to run because I got other stuff, but let's keep it going, man. Thank you so much. All right, buddy.